All right, I'm going to give you guys a cheat code for weight loss. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. And I'm saying this as both a full-time coach and someone who has lost well over 100 pounds of body fat before, who was previously morbidly obese. I have a lot of experience with this. In fact, I've done it twice because I got sick in my early 30s, spent a long time in bed, regained a ton of weight due to depression while being bedridden, eating junk, all that stuff, and then had to lose 100 pounds again, and I did it way faster and easier the second time around than the first time when I was a very young man. So one of the things that I'm just going to say flat out, if you are eating really clean and you fast in the mornings and do any form of intermittent fasting, you are probably going to lose body fat almost irrespective of how many calories you try to eat. Now, when I say that, I do want to make it clear that obviously you could push the limits. You know, it's one of those cases where I can give you a rule and then someone says, well, I'm going to try really hard to prove your rule wrong and break it. You know, people almost have that mindset when you give them stuff like this. They like the extreme hypotheticals. What if I just force fed myself? You know, you guys see what I'm saying? It's like, well, in that case, my answer is you're probably a moron because the whole point of this is to give you a strategy to make it easy, not to say, hey, let's take this tool that makes stuff easier and see if I can break it anyways and still bypass the advantage it gives, right? So let's forget all that sort of thing. Just pointing that out because people love to do that. They love these hypotheticals. And I've even had people say, well, I bet you I could do it. It's like, well, why would you? So over to the point. One of the things I've noticed is that when you eat almost entirely whole foods, and I don't count certain things that some people count as whole foods, like really fatty cuts of meat are not whole foods in this same regard, because at that point you're just loading lots of fat without fiber. So when I say whole foods, I'm generally talking about pretty lean protein sources. They don't have to be super lean, but relatively lean. And then everything else is high fiber. So again, whole foods would be, you know, brown rice, sweet potatoes, nuts. So whether we're talking carbs or fat, like I don't even care if you do a high carb or a low carb or a high fat or low fat with all of your non-protein calories. At the end of the day, if you are eating high fiber foods, and again, what do we mean by that? Whole grains. Okay, so let's talk carb side. Oats, brown rice, whole wheat pastas, beans, sweet potatoes, even potatoes, right? Lots of vegetables. Even to some extent, yeah, fruit. Fruit can work in there, particularly high satiety fruit. So count that as whole foods, right? What about fats? Well, it would be nuts, right? Walnuts, peanuts. Avocados. Avocados are an amazing whole food that falls into this category. High fat, but then again, all healthy fats and high in fiber, high in satiety. And why does that matter for this purposes? Because if we're going to talk about weight loss, if you're going to eat fat sources, if those fat sources include both fiber and are fats that promote higher rates of fat oxidation, they're not fattening. Okay? They're not fattening. And that's exactly what we see with a lot of those healthy fats. So when I make these statements, I want to be clear. I'm not telling you a certain macro split, and I'm assuming you're getting sufficient protein. You're shooting for around that 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight, right? So if you weigh 80 kilograms, it's at least 120 grams of protein, okay? So if we're in that range, we are hitting those sort of numbers, and we are eating all whole foods, it's actually somewhat difficult to overeat for most people already. Okay, and I'm not saying you can't add flavorings and salts, but I mean, literally, let's come back over. What are we talking about? Brown rice, sweet potatoes, nuts, avocados, things like that. Again, not even telling you to follow a specific macro breakdown. Because quite frankly, I think for fat loss, I don't think macro counting outside of your protein even matters. Once you're in a deficit, I think it's almost complete nonsense. There's a matter of, are you getting proper balance in your nutrition? Is everything where it needs to be? Are you getting the healthy foods that you need? Okay. I don't think exact macrograms even matter for fat loss. They can affect how you feel, appearance, some other stuff. But at the end of the day, once we get into a calorie deficit, all those whole food calories, carbs, fat, whatever, they're going to be fairly equal in terms of what they do in terms of energy expenditure, maintenance calories, all that stuff. So it's already pretty hard to overeat, though. If you follow this advice, a lot of people are just going to lose weight by default. Okay? I'm going to say over half of people. All right, what happens when you start combining that with like some intermittent fasting? Okay, intermittent fasting, another easy hack that about half of people find successful for fat loss and half don't. And it's not magic. Intermittent fasting doesn't allow you to bypass, calories in, calories out, right? It doesn't do that. But what it is that it's a good appetite controlling tool. And here's what I'm going to suggest with that. A lot of people know, well, for me, it worked, and then other people are like, well, it didn't because it just made me hungry and I overate more later in the day. Okay? But the people who do that are who are the people who have that issue with intermittent fasting? It's the flexible dieters. It's the people who work in treat and junk food every day. The people who like, well, I'm going to have some refined sugar every day. I'm going to work in butter, whatever. I'm going to have some cookies or ice cream. Those are the people who struggle with that. Because if we come back over to the smaller feed window, and let's say you only are eating 6 hours or 8 hours a day, and that is your whole feed window, and you skip breakfast. You don't eat early in the morning. You don't eat till later in the day. If you were eating all those whole foods, we come back over to the difficulty in overeating. When you have to squeeze them into an even smaller feed window, you're not eating them for 12 or 14 hours a day or 16. You're eating like a 6 or an 8 hour feed window. The high satiety and volume of those foods, particularly all the fibrous foods, the fibrous whole foods, whether it's carb or fat sources, okay, that stuff is hard to overeat. And when you're in a smaller feed window with its slower gastric emptying times and just the feelings of satiety and fullness, most people are going to start losing weight and start losing body fat if they eat this way, right? They're going to tend to do so. And I would suggest that a lot of people, there's no need to even count calories doing that because you're going to get leaner and still have the possibility for muscle growth. Because you're eating mostly whole foods, there's a lot of benefits to that for recovery training. If protein is sufficient, your training is dialed in, unless you're a very advanced lifter, you may still even gain muscle. So your physique and health are just going to improve continually on that sort of approach. So it really is just an easy hack. It is an easy fat loss hack. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.